All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Vida, and I am the Executive Director of the Northeastern Pennsylvania Chamber Music Society, as well as your host for this evening. Welcome to tonight's installment and the final one of our 2021 Music Matters series. Be sure to sign up on our website for our newsletter so that as we plan for this summer and the fall season, we can keep you up to date. Tonight's workshop is made possible by the support of our generous donors. If you do enjoy tonight's program, we hope you will consider making a donation so that we can continue to bring you quality programs such as tonight's workshop with Dr. Lisa Caravan. Additionally, we hope you will like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as share our share our content on social media. For more information on NEPACMS, our Music Matters series, to sign up for our newsletter or to make a donation, please visit www.nepacms.org. Please note that tonight's workshop is being recorded for possible rebroadcasts at a later date. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest for this evening. Dr. Lisa Caravan, a string pedagogue, cellist, and conductor, is currently the Assistant Professor of Music Teaching and Learning at the Eastman School of Music. She is a sought-after clinician both nationally and internationally. She has a long, illustrious biography, which we will put in the link rather than me reading it all to you. So at this point, I think I'll turn it over to Dr. Caravan. Welcome, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me this evening. Thank you to the Northeastern Pennsylvania Chamber Music Society. I'm really quite excited to talk to you today about some of the research that I've done in terms of practice strategies. And, hopefully as we move through this evening, that you might get an idea or two in how to change up your practicing, or if you're teaching, how perhaps we can help our students to move towards figuring out how to go about practicing and kind of what kind of decisions that they can make. So there's more autonomy for us as players and then for students in their practice room. So tonight is really about being interactive. I love hearing from people. So I might call on you just because it's called Zoom, and it seems like the only way I have found through my teaching at Eastman is to just call on someone, okay? The other way we'll participate is through the chat. So I'll be asking some questions, and just feel free to add your thoughts because I want to make this as much applicable to you and tailor this session to you, and I get to know you through asking some questions. So the first thing I want to talk about is how I was as a high school student when I was practicing. I'm going to give you the scenario. I used to, because I grew up in a very musical family. Both of my parents play music. My two older sisters are violinists, and I was the youngest playing the cello. I'm a cellist. And in high school, I would I did this thing where I'd be like, oh, I'm going to practice, Mom. Yeah, while you teach your piano lessons. And do you know what I did? I would start practicing a little bit at the beginning of her teaching, and then I'd set all my stuff up, and then I'd be like, I'm just going to go watch TV. But then I'd always go back before she did her, before she ended her lessons. And of course she knew what I was doing, but I was just trying to get out of practice. I really was. And part of it, is just being, I think, a teenager and being, focused on other things. But I think for me, I had 1 year of lessons with somebody where I only worked on one piece the whole year. My motivation level in that year went significantly down. And that's when I was a sophomore in high school. And so I didn't make a lot of progress. And one question I always like to start off asking is, if you would add to the chat, is what do you like about practicing? What do you like? Let's be positive on our first go. So you have about 2 minutes to write in the chat. What do you like about practicing? Ooh, Sabrina, I love that. Mm-hmm. Seeing progress. I'm seeing a lot of that. Oh, a third one. I should be doing a research study right now. I could code the progress. Getting to know my instrument. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing a theme from all of us, right? It's a time to connect with our instrument. It's a time to maybe get away from what's going on around us and to just have almost a time for meditation, and music really can soothe the soul, right? And for us to have that time. And I also love seeing how much, if we are progressing, and I liked how somebody wrote if and when, like if we're progressing in our practicing, it's more motivating, right? So we're going to talk today about maybe how we can be more efficient in terms of what kinds of things can you do in the practice room to maybe get to that progression piece a little faster. I mean, everything ebbs and flows, you know what I mean, in our playing and in our practicing. And like I was telling you, in high school, I wasn't ready for the seriousness. And honestly, I didn't get into my top music schools. I did not get into my top music schools. It may have been because I was playing piano as well, and I was doing voice lessons, and I played clarinet as well. So I was kind of doing all these musical things, which helped me to become just an overall musician. But I wasn't really focused really carefully, I think, in the practice room when I was in high school. When I got to my master's degree under Alan Harris at Eastman, I did my master's in performance. He told me, okay, so you're coming here, but you have to practice 6 to 8 hours a day. And I was like, okay. I said, okay, because here's my master teacher at Eastman basically saying, this is what you need. And I was like, okay. But I would never do that now, because what ended up happening is I wasted so much time in the actual practice room because I was taking so much time that I wasn't being efficient. And what can happen to us physically when we when we practice that long? What can happen? This is time to jump in.
Get bored.
Oh, I love it. Get bored. Yes. Yeah.
Hurt yourself.
Hurt yourself. What else?
Feel really alone.
You know, this is a really important point. Feeling really alone. And I was listening to actually a session by a therapist who works with a lot of musicians at the University of Colorado. And do you know what he said in this to us as teachers? This is for the American String Teachers Association, the conference I went to. He said to us that musicians in particular spend so much time alone that they start creating a narrative of what they think and how they think people are going to think of their own playing. And it really disconnects us from people. So I really thank you for bringing that up, because that's a really big issue, and we get into our heads, right? Even when we're in that practice room. So do we need to practice? Probably. No, I mean, yes, we do. So have you seen this, should you be practicing? Has anyone seen this? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Should you be practicing right now? Yes. Basically, the answer is yes. Okay. You should be practicing. But don't leave the session. Please don't leave the session yet. Okay. And then I love this. I don't want to practice. I want to skip ahead to the part where I'm awesome. Right. Like this is really kind of probably how I thought I wanted to skip all the practice part. And maybe you do too. Okay. So I want to just throw this out and maybe you can add some things in the chat. What is frustrating for you in the practice room? We talked about maybe our positive things, but what are those frustration pieces for you in the practice room? Yes, muscle tension. And the more we practice, sometimes the more muscle tension. Not being able to eat. You've got to eat, Sage. You have to always eat. Okay, take breaks, right? That's one of the biggest things that we need to do in the practice room is actually allow ourselves to take breaks. So I want to go into this idea of how do we get more efficient, okay? And this is one of my favorite kind of things to bring to the table. The standard of one's playing is determined by the standard of one's practice. And then, so how can we know, how can we have a good standard of practice? Well, these are the things, and this is quoted from the Internet Cello Society, which is now part of Cello Bello. If you don't know that website, it's a great one for all string players. First thing I wanted to talk about is, and we're going to do some activities today, to build awareness and to really self-examine. One thing that Ellen Harris always talked to me about is try to listen to yourself from outside of you, because a lot of times we just play and play and play in the practice room and we're only training ourselves to listen, right? Like behind the cello and what that sounds like. And so he would always like encourage me to try to put myself in different parts of the room when I was practicing so I could have a sense of what I actually sounded like. Another thing that we do a lot to build that self-awareness is to record ourselves, right? So we can actually hear what's going on. And we can do that pretty easily with technology these days, okay? Organizing your lessons or your practicing, is very important as well. If we go into the practice room and we say, oh, okay, I'm gonna start with my scale. Okay, great. Okay, and then people are like, okay, then I'm gonna go to maybe my etude, right? So I'm giving you basic organization, but it's actually not really telling me what I should be working on in that. Like, what is the point of scales? Why do we work on scales, right? Is it because every string player does that and tells us that we have to work on scales? Yeah, I feel like everybody wants to say, yep, yeah, that's why I practice them, right? Because my teacher tells me to, right? So it's really, if we think about how music is constructed, especially our tonal music, a lot of them is basically scales or hidden scales. So we get to know our geography, the fingerboard geography, which is really important. But I guarantee you that a lot of us check out during our scale practice. Okay. So so is that good practice, or is that maybe we need to think about how we can engage our mind a little bit more in our scale practice? So one thing that I had a teacher do with me is I did 4 octave scales, and I started at the top of the scale and I went down and then I went back up. And I did that. He was like, don't ever practice it at the bottom. And I was like, come on. Well, you know why he said that is because I consistently practiced the beginning of the scale all of the time. I never practiced the top. I would barely practice it. So he switched it around on me, and it basically, I had to really think. My brain was more engaged with starting at the top. Okay. So we have to figure out how we can concentrate on these things, which is the next thing. We have to really think about like listening to what it actually sounds like and what it looks like, right? String playing to me, and this is a different session, but it's a set of choreographed movements, right? If you think about your bow arm and how it moves, you can change the speed of your arm and it should change the sound in some way, right? If we're doing a martelé bow stroke, right, there is going to be some speed in the bow, right? And we should see that. If you look at yourself in the mirror and you have the same rate all of the time of the bow, and that's your goal, that's great, right? But if you're trying to change articulations, you want to really be visually connected to what you look like, right? And that also goes in with the oral. And then we have to keep monitoring ourselves and then questioning. I think a lot of the times what I was doing is I was trying to practice hard sections because, we'd say hardest first. You always want to practice the hardest part first, right? To really figure it out. But sometimes I would not get better. So at that part. So instead of me analyzing what I needed to do differently, I kept beating my head against the wall, right? And trying the same strategies. So I'm going to encourage you today to think about how we can tackle one passage in many different ways. Okay. So I love this little side. Does practice make perfect? Who heard that saying growing up? Anybody? Have you heard practice makes permanent? People like to say that instead. I don't really buy that one either. I've got to be honest, because you can have a good day and you can have a bad day. Does that mean all your practicing is not going well? No. Okay. But that happens to us. I guess what I want you to take from these slides is that we have to learn from our mistakes instead of saying, oh my gosh, I can't do it. Right? We can learn from those mistakes. We can learn how to maybe go about something different. So I encourage you to make mistakes. Right? Which sounds kind of silly, but that's where you're going to become more of your own teacher in the practice room. So this is the other thing that happens to me when I'm practicing is I think about anything other than practicing. Anybody else do this? Like you start sitting down, you're about to practice, and what are you thinking about other than what you're doing? I think somebody thinks about the fact that they're hungry. Oh, I like that. Practice makes better. Yes, I love that. So a really important aspect of this is this comment by Howard Snell, The Art of Practice. As soon as effective listening takes place, the ear identifies what needs to be done and guides the technique's search for a solution. And so if we're so distracted by everything around us and we're not really listening, we can't make that step, right, to make some choices in how to work on things. Do you hear I keep saying the word choice? I'm saying that on purpose. You have many choices to go about something, right? And the more you mix it up, right? And we'll talk about how to do that today. I think the more you actually learn the passage, okay? And we'll talk about that. So we're gonna have our first activity right now because I wanna really talk about developing this idea of self-awareness, because this might be easy for some of you, but this might be more challenging for others. We're all in different spots. So one thing that I've been becoming more conscious of, and maybe it's because I have a playing injury, is how I approach the cello and how I'm thinking about like just how my body is moving when I'm playing the instrument. So I heard some of you before say you have some muscle tension when you're playing. So I love to start my practicing with just open strings. Now, people do this a lot of times to do open strings to work on their tone production, right? This is one of the major things you can start to do. It's just to warm up the muscles also in your body. But I want to encourage you to think about how you could ask yourself different questions to yourself, and I'll do it today for you. And think about different parts of your body, or actually working on how to focus where your energy is and where your mind is, why you're doing that. So what we're going to do today, if you can get your instruments, and you please stay on mute, unfortunately with Zoom. And what I want you to do is we're going to start from low and go to high and then back to low. And all I want you to do is two bows, so a down bow and an up bow on open strings. So we're going to start on your lowest string, and then we're going to go to C, if you're cello, right, C, C, and then D, D, A, or G, G, D, D, A, A. And then obviously if you're a different instrument, you do your strings, okay? And I'm going to ask you some questions while you're doing it. Okay, I have the questions on the slide as well, because if you're playing, you might not be able to hear me, which is okay. But I want you to try to, while you're doing this exercise, and I suggest you do it kind of at a slow tempo. So 1, 2, 3, 4, but don't try to stay with a partner. It won't work, right? But do your speed. But try to follow these questions and see what you notice. Okay, so here, let's start. Here we go. The questions are on the next line. Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, ready and go. Going to the next one. So can you feel your back muscles as you push and pull the bow? Let's go to the next one. Is my back wide and free? How are you sitting? Are your shoulders free? What about your elbow? What about your finger joints? Where's my attention? What does it look like to look around the room? Look around the room. Don't look down, look around the room. How big is your space? Can you feel the whole space as you're playing? And then do you feel your feet? Are your feet connected? Good. Stop for a second. So how did that feel? Was that strange? You can say yes. It was kind of strange, yeah? Okay, so I want you to do it one more time. Do just, let's everybody be on a G or a D, okay? And I want you to close your eyes, okay? And I want you to feel the hair connected to the string while you pull the bow. And I want you to feel it at every single point. Try to feel the hair connected to the string, okay? And hopefully it won't slide around on you if you're really focused on that. Here we go. Let's just do it really slowly. Just a down bow. Here we go. 1, 2, eyes closed, go. Awesome. Now pick a different contact point. So if you were close to the bridge, go somewhere else. Okay, here we go. Try it again. Stay connected. Ready, go. Yeah, okay. Now, sometimes I do this because, you know, us as teachers, right? You can show students things, you can model things, right? But they have to somehow get connected to the feeling, right? Of how to draw that arm so your bow is staying straight. And sometimes if we only do it, like first step is visual, right? The visual really helps us, right? But I encourage you to take it into the physicality as well. And if you have a particular tension spot, right, you can use this questioning and this open string exercise to deal with maybe releasing some of that tension. I know a lot of cellists are really tense on their thumbs on the back of the neck. So one thing I encourage my students to do is like just do less and less tension, right? I want them still to stay connected, but I want them to release it a little bit of a time at a time. And you can do that in exercises, even when you play a scale. You can do a scale like this as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is another self-awareness, like being more aware of a body exercise. And what I want you to do is an octave shift. Okay, so you can pick whatever string you want. Okay, but you're gonna do it on one string. Okay, so I'll sing it. Okay, whatever string you want. This is your time to pick. Okay. And what I want you to do is I want you to go da, dum, ba, dum, and let's do it maybe 2 times, okay? And as you do it, I want you to just focus on something, okay? You can focus on anything you want, okay? It could be a body part, it could be, I don't know, how you're standing. It could be whatever you want, okay? But let's try it. Let's just try it. And then I'm gonna ask you to put in the chat, or you can just say it out loud. I think we're a good size where you could just chime in actually. But let's do let's do 2 octave shifts. Here we go. If you wanna change note, you can. I mean, there's no rules. I can't hear you. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, ready, and go. Awesome. Okay, so tell me, what did you focus on while you did your octave shift? Elbow. Awesome. What else? Pat, what did you focus on? Oh, here we go, calling on people. The notes, that's a good, yes. So you were really listening to intonation. Intonation? Uh-huh. I looked at my basket of dirty laundry I need to wash tomorrow. See, so you were not focusing, huh? Okay, I got that. All right, finger present. Yeah, like focusing on finger. I thank you for being honest. That's wonderful, okay? So I'm gonna give you some questions, okay? So you're gonna do the same. You're gonna go back and forth, okay, in this activity. And I'm gonna guide what you are thinking about this time, okay? So here we go. You can start we did the first one. When you execute the shift, okay? We did the first one. So I'm gonna do it again and give you some questions to think about. So you can please do still octave shifts in this case. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, ready, and go. Okay, move your focus to the center of your bow. Focus on the bow while you do the shift. Okay. Here's the next one. Ooh. Focus on your head. What's your head doing? Is your head involved with the shift, or is it staying balanced with your spine? Okay. Let's do the next one. Focus on your toes as you do the shift. I know it's weird, but focus on those toes. And then try to do the shift with awareness of your whole body. So some of you have talked about the back. Think about the back. Some people thought about the elbow. Some people thought about the fingers. Can you be aware? Okay, thank you. So how did it change for you? Did your shift change? Elisa, how did it change for you?
When I started thinking about different things, like the shift of thinking about different things, that kept messing me up. And then I got back into a groove of it, and then I thought about something else again, and it like messed me up again.
So maybe that's a good thing to work on, because we get distracted when we perform. And you don't want to have a distraction in a performance. Guess what? Mess you up, right? So if you can get better at going through questions like this, then you're working on really focusing your concentration. Thanks for that. What else? Claire, do you want to say it out loud, or you want to? She's writing. Margaret, what about for you? Oh, your spine got longer. So maybe because when we talked about the head, right? Yeah. Maureen, what about for you? Oh, yeah. Will you unmute yourself and tell us? Oh, thank you. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm learning how to do this. This is my first one. As soon as I decided what I wanted to do, I couldn't do it because I was thinking of something else.
So it's it's a distraction piece again. So I want to encourage you to think about how if we get too much into just doing back and forth, right, in one way, that we might be focusing a little bit too narrow instead of focusing on like the bigger picture of how to just be aware of the whole body. And guys, I'm having you try new things today, so it's gonna throw you for a loop. But this is a way for us to become more aware of the physicality of what it means to do this octave shift. And so I encourage you to keep exploring with this idea, because then if you do have these little tension things happening, this will help you to think about how you can release them. So you might want to spend more. I mean, I made you switch really quickly, right? Because this is a session, but you might want to spend a little bit more time on that exercise. Judy says posture got better and shift became easier. Thank you. So a lot of the times this can happen if it can happen that it gets easier because you're releasing the body. So thanks for giving that a try. So that's the first thing that I really wanted to talk about with you guys, is just working on the awareness of what your body is doing and practicing. And I say that because of me having to practice 6 to 8 hours a day. I was not listening to my body when I was practicing, and I ended up hurting myself in the process. I did get better, but it's not the most efficient way to go about it. Okay. I talked earlier about organization in your lesson or in your practicing, excuse me. And a lot of this has to do with goal setting. Okay. So I have a long-term goal of wanting to be a better cellist, right? That's pretty broad, right? What does that mean? I don't know. You know what I mean? Maybe I want to play a certain piece, and I'm premiering a new piece. A piece was written, I commissioned a new piece, and I haven't been able to perform it yet, partially because of COVID, right? So that's a goal of mine, to learn these new pieces. I might have short-term goals, okay? And I might have these intermediate goals, but what I encourage you to do is really write down specific goals of your practicing. Now, you might say, this is going to take time. And I'm like, yes, it will take time, but it will focus what you actually do in the practice room so we don't get distracted by other things. So if you have a certain thing that you want to get better at, maybe you're practicing Bach, and maybe you want your memory to get better. Okay. There are specific things you can do to help with getting your memory better. And honestly, it's not playing it through over and over and over. That is not what will necessarily help. Okay. So think about really getting specific goals. We're going to work on that today in our session. Okay. This is the other thing I think about with organization. What am I doing? What am I doing it for? We did warming up the mind and muscles today. What do you think skill building practices? What kind of things do you do right now in the practice room that are skill building? We talked about one already today. Remember?
No.
Scale, right? That's a skill building. What other things do we do in the practice room to get our skills up? Etudes, absolutely. If you really want to learn your fingerboard, arpeggios. Arpeggios is a skill building, okay? You could say working on a specific bow stroke is a specific skill as well. And absolutely, double stops is a skill. So there might be part of your practicing that's skill building. There might be part of your practicing where you're previewing places that you might need in your piece. Previewing harder spots or the skills that you might need are really an effective way. You might have a working part that I kind of talk about. That's the meat and potatoes of my practice. And then polishing and the performing. I don't do this all in one sitting, right? I take many breaks. I practice at different parts of the day in order to get these things in. So I want to briefly talk about this, and you have a handout which you can dive into this a little bit more in the handout. But when we look at a new piece, you know, there are so many, what this pedagogue, Paul Harris, he's from the UK, he's actually a clarinetist, and he calls, there's a bunch of ingredients in a piece. And they all are interconnected, and we have to have experiences with those ingredients to perform or to, you know, improve on the piece. Okay, so you can see here we have some of the skill building ones that we were talking about, like scales, arpeggios can be in here. We listen a lot to pieces, right? We listen to them. We have to get them in our ear, right? Maybe we sing part of our pieces. If you don't sing in your practicing, I'm a big encourager of singing. It helps to get our intonation a bit better. There's rhythms, right? There's all these ingredients you can see, right? And, you know, one thing that he suggests, and he does this as a teacher with his students. So he does not give a student the piece of music at the first lesson. Like, let's say they're working on a concerto, okay? Sibelius concerto. He will not hand a Sibelius concerto, the first movement, to the student. He will actually hand something like this that will be filled out. So he will write in all the different kind of rhythms. He'll write the key and scale areas. And we all know, right, that pieces modulate and have different kind of keys in them. So he will write all the ingredients in the piece in this kind of map. And it's a proactive way to go about saying to your student, or maybe you analyze your piece like this next time, and you take different ingredients from this and you practice it together. So one thing for me is I have to always practice the bowings clearly in Bach, like the 1 and 3s and the 3 and 1s, especially for me in a Bach movement, don't always work so well. I don't sound musical with it because I'm getting distracted by the unevenness of a 3 and 1 bowing and a 1 and 3, right? So what my teacher would do, he didn't call it like this ingredient map, but he would have me do it specifically in a scale and get it so it's musical and it feels great in a scale. And then I put it into my Bach movement. So this, like, let's say you want to learn a piece and learn it kind of quickly. If you learn the ingredients of the piece before actually working on the piece, do you think it will be easier? I think it might, right? So the next piece, or if you're teaching, think about what actually does this piece need, right? And I think for us, there's a lot of left hand, right hand, or there's a lot of bow distribution things if we're string players that we really need to consider to actually make the piece really effective musically, right? To work on that, the bowing in particular. So it's a way to go about looking at your piece in a different way. And then you just use this before looking at the actual notation, which is kind of scary, but kind of like you get to be creative and put different elements together. In this case, like especially dynamics and articulation, you can do all sorts of different things with that. Okay. I think we won't do this today. Okay. So I want to get into some specific strategies that are research-based, and these are all in your handout. Okay. So if we don't get through all of them today, you do have access to them, but I want to talk about mental practice. Mental practice is typically used to help with memory. So one thing my teacher in undergrad said, Jeffrey Solo, he always told me, he's like, well, you've got to like basically lay down at night and completely think through the prelude to the suite that you're playing in. So I was doing, I think, 2 at the time. And he's like, you got to lay there and you got to imagine think about all the notes, the bowings, and how it feels to play the piece, and see if you can get through it all from the beginning to end. And if your memory stops at a certain point, then you've got to either like get out of bed and look at the music, or try to figure it out and then go back and do it again. So this idea of memory doesn't necessarily come from just having to play the piece over and over. You can mentally think through your music to help, again, to memorize your music. Try it the next time you have to play something from memory. The other thing, this is a quote from Barbara Fast. She is a great piano pedagogue at the University of Oklahoma. And she uses it for visualization to help with performance anxiety. So does anyone have performance anxiety here? You don't yeah, I mean, I do. Yeah. And so this is a really interesting way where you can try to imagine yourself walking on stage, like hearing the clapping, feeling the tension in the room. I think it's really, it's there when you're on stage. So we're trying to simulate that so we can work through that in visualizing it. And so it's a way that people use this idea. Okay. I want to talk about silent practice a little bit. Silent practice is actually doing the motion that you need, but not actually playing it, right? So you could all right now do silent practice of your octave shift, right? You could do that, right? And that is a type of, you're doing the physical motions, but you're not actually doing it out loud, okay? I really suggest you guys do that with your bow arms. So you can really look, if you are trying to, let's say you have tension in your bow arm, right? Let's say your wrist isn't moving the way you want for a sautille or for a spiccato, right? You work on that away from the instrument before you put it on the, don't keep trying to do it on the instrument. Don't keep trying. Do something different, okay? And do it away from the instrument, or obviously left-hand passages. Yes, of course you use the fingerboard for that kind of stuff, okay? But silent practice can be a really effective way, okay? Let's talk about deliberate, other metacognitive. This is like you're making a deliberate choice, okay? To use a practice method, okay? So I like to use add a note. Add a note is for when I want to get something cleaner and a little faster, okay? So a lot of times people spend hours and hours with the metronome and just putting the metronome up a few clicks to get things faster and faster. Who does that? I did that for a long time. I still do it sometimes. It's not that I don't do it, but I do this other thing now too. Because somebody told me, like, you can't, you're not actually practicing in the condition that you're going to play it, right? We have to practice, right? If I just do this, right, and I just slowly get it faster and faster, number one, it takes a really long time. Okay, I got to be honest, right? So what I do is I will add a note. So I'll play 2 notes quite quickly. That wasn't very clear. I need to do it again, right? Right? So I also do fast passages that way, and I'm giving you a very brief demonstration, but I will do it until it's comfortable before I add another note to the mix. Does that make sense? So I'm practicing going from fast to fast to fast. Other people use rhythmic variation practice for this thing as well. And I bet all of you do this, right? So long, short, 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 right? So this is what we typically do. Instead of just doing the metronome method, we do rhythmic variation practice. And then I would say, why not try add a note as well? Backwards practice is something I do now because I want to learn things faster. So there's in your handout, there is a link to the handout if you don't have it. I think there's a link in the chat. So there's this idea of, this is a Prokofiev, this little, right? You see how it's just a scale down, it goes down, 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 okay? One day I decided to do it the other way around. I started from the bottom and went up. How did you think I did the first time I tried that? I mean, I practiced this passage a lot. How do you think I did going backwards? It's literally like I could not play the cello, guys. Like literally, my fingers did not work. I was training them so well one way, but I didn't do the other way. Well, guess what? It got cleaner the more times I practiced the backwards, and I trained my fingers to do it both ways. It's the same fingering. Why did it feel so different, right? I mean, because you're starting coming from a different spot, but it made the whole thing cleaner, okay? So if you have a passage that's bothering you fast-wise, I definitely suggest it. So we talked about double stops a little bit. Some people put it on the list that we do skill building ideas with double stops. Well, intonation is one of those really hard things on the string instruments because we don't have a fretboard like a guitar. If we only had frets, our lives would be so much easier, right? We wouldn't sound as good, right? So intonation is one of those things we have to continually work on, okay? I use drones all of the time. Okay, who uses drones when they're practicing scales? Okay, so there is on YouTube the tuning CD. Maybe somebody can find it. The tuning CD is amazing because it plays tonic and dominant of your scale. Okay, and when I went to Alan Harris, he's like, "Oh, you now practice with the drone all the time with your scales." And drone, who can, so a drone is like you have a note on the tuner going like this the whole time, C or G. And you play a scale while you're playing, while you are hearing that drone note from either a tuner or from, I have the tuning CD, which is up on YouTube. You can play a CD, you can play that YouTube link and you can play the scale while you're listening to that note. It really helps our ear to refine the intonation because we're always in Western classical art music, okay? What we play a lot of the time, not all the time, okay? But we are always like comparing notes and their intervals. So this really helps us to tune our ear and to listen for that. I'm going to go into this next little exercise. So because a lot of the times in Bach in particular, you really need to analyze the harmony in order to play the passage in tune. We have to know what the harmonic ideas are going on in it, okay? So this is a way where you can figure out possibly what's happening with the harmony. So this is a very short passage from Bach. It's really only lies well, I've got to be honest, for violin and viola. It's not as great for cello. But you can see what this author, Suzanne Klein, is doing. She's taking the big note of each four notes. You see that? So A sharp to F sharp, right? D, B, E sharp to C sharp, okay? And she's basically practicing the hand frame and training the ear on what to listen for when you're playing those other notes, right? So it's kind of like a drone. I use the Tonal Energy app. I don't know if you know what that app is, but I use it because you can play notes and sustain notes. And so I can practice this kind of thing. But she suggests taking it completely out of context and playing these notes so you get used to it in your ear. And so when you actually play the first line, the A line, you're more in tune to those notes when you arrive to the A sharp and F sharp. Okay. And then she takes it even a step further and she does it in quarter notes. And then she does, oh, look at this rhythmic variation practice that we already talked about. So when you have a passage that's bothering you in terms of intonation, my suggestion is to think about where are the shifts, right? And then how can I break it down a little bit more in terms of the harmony? Okay, let's play this. Yeah, let's play this. Okay, so if you're interested, let's play the first line, the A line. Okay, here we go. Let's try it. One, and let's do it kind of slowly. It's a little awkward. Da, da, ba, ba. Here we go. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, go. Okay, so that's the passage. Now let's play B. Okay, play B. 1, 2, ready, and go. And connect. So you're listening to those basic harmonies. Ooh, I don't want to go that way. Let's do C. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and go. Let's go back to the main one. Let's go back to A and do it again. Let's see if the intonation, you're listening for those low notes and the harmonic changes. Ready and go now. You to hear the harmony while you're playing, that's actually okay. You can use a drone like on the Tonal Energy app that I was talking about to play those. You can actually like program those notes to play for you. I once had a kid do a double stop etude in the Schroeder cello book, and I actually had him create an accompaniment line for him to play over because double stops are hard to tune sometimes. So he created a bass line. And it actually really helped his intonation really quickly. Okay. So, I want to go to this passage that I have in your handout. Okay. That this is from the Prokofiev Cello Sonata. And before I can even know how to practice, I need to know what do I need to play this effectively, right? And so what I will do first, especially when I have a passage that is not working well, do I do this all the time? No. Okay. And, but I do this when I have a passage I need to work through. Okay. So I analyze what I need first. So I'm asking you to look at measures 37 and 38, the double stop, basically bars. So when I analyze this for myself, I said, okay, well, there's shifting, there's double stops. It's the interval of a sixth, right? That tells me something. It's chromatic. There's some slurs. There's actually some spiccato. The finger spacing changes, right? Because if you're moving in the cello, right, or any string instrument from higher to lower, the finger spacing has to change. And then this is actually pretty fast. Right, it's pretty fast. Okay, so that's the other thing I have to consider is what is my goal speed for this. So, and I want to have a certain character, right? Because this is a really fun movement. If you haven't listened to it, I suggest you do. Okay. So I analyze it. What are the skills? Okay. So then I make my plan. Okay. So if we're doing double stops, the first thing I always do is I play the bottom note before the top note. Why? Why do we do that? Why do we play bottom before top? What is the reason? To ground the intonation, correct? Like, right, that you always tune to the lower, right? You always tune. That's why we always want bass players in our orchestras, because we need them, or tuba, right? We need them to really ground our intonation, right? So I then do the top note by itself. I do this all slowly and legato. If I'm doing intonation work, I do it slowly and legato, because that gives me more information to my ear than just playing it fast and short. Okay. I had a student do that on me today, actually, earlier. She is working on humoresque. And she was like playing something short. And I was like, well, but you're working on intonation. Do legato, do it slowly. Okay. I also then do isolate the shifts. I do like the first shift. I go forwards, I go backwards. I go forwards, I go backwards. I slur in between. I always do shifts like this, even if it's separate later on. And the reason why I do that is because I want to make sure I understand what I'm feeling like in between the shifts. This, yes, I am now doing the motion that I need for the shift in this case, right? Because I've played it out loud. So I do a lot of this slurring technique throughout when I do double stops in particular. I go between double stops. Like, look at all of these ways I can practice this. Rhythmic variation practice to get myself faster. What didn't I put on there that I could do to get the speed up that I mentioned earlier? What could I do? I could do add a note, actually, with this passage as well, right? And I didn't write that. So I make this list of practice strategies. The more you get better, I mean, honestly, the more you do this and the more you can recall these different strategies, the more you don't actually have to write them down. But if you actually want to basically re-engage your mind in different ways, you have to use different strategies to do that, okay? So that's how I learned this passage pretty quickly. I had to learn the Prokofiev fast because somebody was like, oh, want to do a recital? And I was like, okay. And I mean, it was probably 2 months that I learned the whole sonata. And the only way I could do it was by using some of these types of strategies, okay? So I wanted you to think about a passage that you could think about that you've been struggling with, that you would put into maybe the chart on the last page of the handout. Think about a passage for you. What is the thing that is bothering you the most about it? For me, sometimes I know that I've done so much nitty-gritty kind of work that I lose the sense of the whole when I play through a passage and how it relates, you know, kind of the transitions, how they relate. So I tend to, if I've been working on like a section like this, I have to make sure I do the transitions in and out as a practicing, because if I just practice sections and not transitions, then I've also kind of missed the boat. Judy, you're talking, oh, spiccato. So spiccato is a great thing to work on. You can basically almost take any piece and put staccato to it, spiccato to it, right? You can play easy tunes with your spiccato, right? If you find like you want to really get a technique like that, you might have, I would encourage you to do simple tunes so you can get into the feeling of it. You can do it in other, you know, parts of the instrument. Dvorak first thumb position shifts. Oh yes. So Claire, can you, will you let us know how you've been working on them? I don't think I hear you, Claire. Ah, it never works. The Zoom never works. But a lot of the times when I will just practice the thumb stuff going back, I would do backwards and forwards a lot between that, right? I would do backwards and forwards, and I would do actually the hand frame I need, and I would leave out the other stuff. Because until I can really go quickly between those things, then yeah, that will really help. So I hope today gives you some ideas on how you can mix up your practicing. That's what I wanted you to do, like mix up your practicing. Think about how you can do things, you can tackle things, and I encourage you to analyze what you need to do first, because you end up being your teacher most of the time, right? Because you see your teacher once a week. And that teacher is kind of a listening ear to check in with what we're doing. And honestly, we are our own teachers in the practice room. So the more you can kind of think about it, analyze it, teach yourself, right? In the practice room, I think the more and more effective we can be in the end of doing that. Some closing thoughts is, if you keep working on something and you feel like it isn't getting better, right? Do something different. That's the key. Do something different, right? If a lot of the times, if there is a passage that's not working, sometimes double stops, you know, honestly, the bow is more of a problem for double stops than sometimes the left hand. We have to pay attention more to what the bow is doing and how it's creating the tone. Because if the tone isn't there and isn't strong, right, we tend to do weird things with our left hand to try to force it to happen. Okay, so those are just things, little things to think about. I wanted to leave some time for questions, like what are your burning questions of what are you hoping for? What kind of questions do you have for me? I've been, you know, practicing kind of a lot in my past. Any questions?
I have a question. So I've read things that focusing on things in small chunks, say working on 3 different pieces, and say 10 minutes, and then switching off and another 10 minutes, and then going back to it, helps to you know, create, some kind of something in the brain that makes you learn it faster. I mean, what do you think about that?
So there's this thing called interleaved practice, which that might be what you're referring to. And so what I find there's a research study done with baseball pitchers, okay? And essentially what they did is they had two groups. There was one group that they were doing the same pitch, the same type of pitch over and over and over in succession, okay? And so like a curveball and doing all of those and then doing fastball, right? And then there was another group which it was randomized, right? Where they would do like a curveball, fastball, all these in a different order. They didn't know exactly what was coming. So what they found is when these people were in the actual game, they had a better rate of success coming from the randomized group than doing block practicing. Okay. So this can be a really effective technique. I suggest doing it closer to when you really know how to play the passage, right? And the reason why is because how many chances do you have to do a certain shift in the performance? You have one chance, right? So the thing is if you only do this thing called block practicing, right? Where let's say you spend literally an hour on just, the Bach third prelude, right? And you spend 20 minutes on just right? You spend all the time just on there for like 30 minutes. You've taken, again, the conditions of performing way out of context. We don't do that, right? So my suggestion though, is if you don't know the piece well enough yet, I'd be careful to use the interleaved practice idea, okay? But the interleaved can really get you ready for performance. So I did that with the Prokofiev. I put a timer on, it's even less than 10 minutes. I put a timer on for like 2 minutes and I picked like a passage to do. You only get one chance to play it. And then you have to go back to something else. It's kind of one of the most frustrating experiences ever. And I suggest you try it and you'll be like, what did she do this for to me? But actually it puts you again in the conditions of how you would have to perform it. I think the idea you're talking about is more distributed practice. And it's a really good way to focus in on something for a very short time so you can stay focused on the goal of that moment. And that's why then switching to something else gets again, like you're talking about, the brain, it's waking it up. I think the biggest thing that we've done for so long is just practice something over and over and over and not been connected to actually what we're doing. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. But look up interleaved practice. It's a really interesting concept. Other questions?
I have a question, if you can hear me.
I can.
Awesome. I'm talking to you by phone because I can't get Zoom working on my computer. So this is more a question from a teacher's side of things. How do you, I notice a lot of, especially younger students, they get bogged down by the bar lines. Mm-hmm. So you'll often hear these, if not even musical spaces, I mean like sound spaces, but you'll hear these sort of mental spaces as they go from bar to bar or, a section to a section. Mm-hmm. So how do you have a strategy for kind of overcoming these boundaries that they don't even perceive, but it's clear that that's what's going on?
Yeah, I probably one thing I would encourage putting in general is to have them do like a performance, like piece, or, you know, I mean, the Suzuki method calls it the review piece, right? But like to have them like try to get them into the mind space of playing through something, even without those kind of hesitations and stops that I know what you're talking about. Because I mean, I can tell you right now, I'll refer to my 7th grader who's working on this humoresque. I've been very sectionalized with her, teaching her, honestly, going right for this part first, like going there first, right? I went there. I didn't even go to the beginning. I did not teach her in the beginning, actually, until today. And so I know she will have some time working on those transition pieces that you're talking about, right? Because she's very sectionalized at this point. But what I will have her do, and it works with humoresque in particular, is to then kind of, you know, she's been learning 2 lines, 2 lines, 2 lines, essentially. I will then have her do the 4 line, right? And I'll kind of basically accordion it out. Like, even if I start at the middle, I will then go on either side of that. And I think I was talking about that with transitions earlier. Sometimes what I do, and I did this in a master class recently, there was a student playing the Casado. Do you guys know that piece? Right, there's this piece, and it has a lot of double stops. You know, and there's so many places where you can hesitate, right, to get those double stops. So what I had her do in the master class is actually just practice the connection piece, right? So the up bow to the down bow, right? That is what I had her practice. So if I do that similarly in Bach. If I can get them to play, right? I might do this, right? I might have them make up a little connection between those, or between the single note before and the chord. So I'm actually pinpointing that transition. And that seems to help with that kind of hesitation, or them getting the tone immediately. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Any other things? Yes. Do you have advice for getting back to playing after an injury? I injured my neck and yes. Okay. So I'm actually in that place. I've been having wrist issues, and I've been going to a physical therapist, and I cannot stress enough, maybe because I've been through it. Number one, to get somebody who knows what they're doing in terms of the physicality, like a physical therapist or a doctor. But the thing for me that I had to understand and realize is that I was not developing my muscles in the appropriate way in order for them to be used to, like, to the point that they're supposed to, I'm not saying this well, but like I was overusing my neck muscles and using them in a way that it wasn't appropriate. So I was getting so tired all of the time because I had bad posture, right? And I've had a wrist thing in particular, okay? So what my physical therapist has been trying to do is actually really work on me building my muscle here in the muscle belly of my arm, so I can protect my wrist, okay? So I can't stress enough that understanding how we stress our muscles when it's not the job, right, of maybe a particular muscle or ligament, right? Because we don't have muscles in our fingers. There are no muscles there, okay? But we need to develop our muscles in other areas to take the responsibility away from where we are stressing it, okay? Now, I'm not going to, and I also think when you're getting back from an injury, that you have to do as small increments as possible, and to recognize when the pain is just soreness, right, from doing something again, or the pain is actually re-injuring. The other thing that my physical therapist talks a lot about is icing after you practice. Okay, so if you have a particular spot where it gets inflamed from practicing, she's like, you need to ice that spot after you do it. So I'm slowly actually getting back into playing right now from this wrist injury that I've had for quite some time. But I did go to a hand surgeon to make sure I wasn't injuring, like I needed to know that I wasn't injuring myself by playing. I needed to know that I could build up my muscles around that to protect. So that's how I would recommend maybe moving forward, that you really understand, and posture is a big thing, right, with playing instruments. And if your violin, like, I mean, talk to our, Professor Vida here about the neck and violin, because I think that's something that setup is so key with all of these instruments, so we're not injuring ourselves. That's a really good question. Any other questions? Thank you for your questions, and thanks for trying my crazy ideas today.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for being with us. I think, this is one of those subjects that we could go down the rabbit hole for hours with. I certainly do with my own students, and I see some of them have been on here this evening. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Thank you for supporting us, this season. Do check out our website, www.nepacms.org, to see what we're going to be doing in the summer and in the fall with our concert series, as well as Music Matters. Once again, Lisa, thank you for being here. I also want to thank my wife, Amy. She's in the background. She's our Chief of Operations and makes everything happen here at NEPACMS. So big thank you to her. Once again, our website, www.nepacms.org. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.